Hello, everybody, and welcome to GDT Live, presented by the Game Day Terps podcast. My name's Dayton Camo, alongside me, Colton Davies, for another great episode. Today, we have Zack Phillips from Leafs Nation and the producer of The Sheet on Daily Faceoffs joining us. He joined us this morning. It's a pre-recorded interview. We'll get to that in a few minutes, and then later on in the show, we've got Brad Schlossman coming on from the Grand Forks Herald to talk a little bit about North Dakota, the Keaton Verhoff and Cole Reshny signings, and possibly a little bit about former UND Fighting Hawk Jonathan Toews, who just signed with his hometown team this morning. So, Colton, without further ado, how's it going, man? How has your day been, and what do you think of that Jonathan Toews signing? I know we'll get into that later, but let's just touch on that real quick.
Good. I'm good. We got an awesome interview with Zack Phillips coming up, and then obviously we have our interview with Brad Schlossman, who I just butchered that last name. Holy crap! But Brad will be joining us from the Grand Forks Herald as well, of course, and we're going to talk about Keaton Verhoff and the University of North Dakota. But no, I'm good. Watching all the Panthers celebration videos, and it looks like a great time down in Florida.
Yeah, did you see the video of the boys at the elbow room, and Brad was holding the cup on the balcony, and there was someone behind him like holding the cup so he didn't drop it because he was probably out of his mind hammered? But
yeah, I saw that. That was good.
They also dented it in a few spots. They cracked it at the top and then like dented the bottom, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, something I saw it dented. There was dents and stuff on it, so did see that.
Yeah, and they cracked the upper bowl too.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, fellas, without further ado, you guys are here to see Zack Phillips and see what he has to say about the Leafs. So let's throw back to that interview right now.
Welcome in everyone to GDT Live. Today we're welcoming in the producer of The Sheet as well as the Leafs Nation, Leafs Morning Take, Zack Phillips. And Zack, we're gonna bug you about the Leafs. So let's start with the disappointment of the season. What can you kind of walk us through at the end? What happened there in the playoffs, and what do you think needs to change?
Well, what happened was they did what they do every year. As far as the disappointment, it's a weird thing that keeps happening here in Toronto, where it's like the team that the Leafs lose to most years goes on to the Stanley Cup and plays in there, plays in the final, or wins it, as we saw with the Panthers this year. And a lot of people in Toronto seem to find some type of comfort or solace in that. And it's like, okay, the team that they got knocked out by ultimately was one of the best two teams in the league, so maybe that makes us feel better. But at some point, when you get through 9 years of it, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Who cares that team won? There's no comfort in that. There's no walking away and taking like a participation trophy from it and saying that we were there and went to 7 with them. I think one of the reasons that it was so frustrating, the loss this year, even though they got to 7 against the Panthers, even though it was in the second round, and we saw signs of these next steps that were being taken under Craig Berube and this transformation into a playoff team and a more serious Stanley Cup contender, was that Game 5 of that Panthers series and Game 7 of that series were very reminiscent of, I believe it was Game 4 of the Ottawa series when they had a chance to close it out, and Game 4 last year against the Boston Bruins when it was 2-1 in Toronto. You have an opportunity to tie this thing up before you go back to Boston, and they laid one of the biggest stinkers they could have. And in that series last year, it ends up going down 3-1. They climb back, they go to 7, they lose in overtime. But it's like they find ways to just turn it off. As we kind of saw with Edmonton in a few different scenarios in the playoffs this year, they just turn it off and they say like, hey, we're not going to do that every single night. And I think one of the big things for me is like, if you don't do that every single night, then that's not yet your identity. That's something you could be, but if you have the ability to revert, then that's probably more so who you are. And seeing those games come through was one of the most devastating things possible in each of those. So that's kind of the biggest disappointment and one of the biggest reasons I think that they lost to Florida. I mean, they probably or possibly still lose to Florida anyways, but the embarrassment is kind of more so why it's so disappointing. To answer what they need to do this offseason, I don't know, wait till next summer and see if you can find that guy that's playing for Edmonton right now as a free agent. I don't know. Maybe that's the solution. But yeah, in all seriousness, I don't really know. You're going to lose Marner.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to walk away from him there. I think you kind of need to take like some type of organizational reset this year and look at what do you actually need to do to win? What did the Florida Panthers do? How were the Oilers and the Stars built? How were the Colorado Avalanche built when they won a couple of years ago? Maybe you look back and see how the LA Kings were built when they went on their run, or the Chicago Blackhawks when they went and won 3 Stanley Cup. Like, maybe those are the teams you got to look at and start to do some like historical research and be like, hey, let's get to that point and see if we can get ourselves more in a position to have success. Maybe it's not this year that you go and win the Stanley Cup, but maybe this year is a building block to getting yourself ready so that going forward, you've at least developed the basics that you need to be a competitive team that can actually compete.
Right. And yeah, I mean, before we get into Marner and that whole thing of him leaving and stuff, what did you make of Craig Berube's first season behind the bench?
I thought that there were some serious adjustments that took place and some discomfort from everybody involved. There were points in the season where you could tell that there was a struggle to find the middle ground and get into the system. So one of the things that was talked about a lot in Toronto was the fact that they hadn't been shut out in like, I can't even remember what the number is now. It was years. Like, they hadn't played a game that they got 0 goals in years, which is nuts to think about. You know, like, just to go through how many shutouts you see a season. Maybe you got unlucky, maybe you just have a bad game, but like, they never went through a game where they just couldn't score. And part of that was because they were a team with so much skill and so much ability to score. And then you saw this year, okay, now they're being asked to be this tight checking team that doesn't let up anything, and the offense comes more slowly and a little bit more sluggish. They got shut out in the first game of the season. Like, it was like, bang, right away. We saw that and it was like, holy, this is an adjustment. Like, we're going to have some different style of hockey. So that was one part of it. And then the other side of it was you would see them at times flip right back to Leafs of old, where it was high-flying north-south, or not even north-south, sorry, east-west hockey, getting away from the north-south game where it was just skill plays, defensive zone is opening up, you need your goalie to be unbelievable, and then you're winning 6-4, 6-5. And that was kind of a battle, but as we got towards the playoffs, and especially down the last 2-month stretch, a month and a half stretch, I would probably say, returning from 4 Nations, you could see the identity of Craig Berube start to build into their style of play. And one of the other areas that I think was the most impressive, or one of the areas that I was happiest about that you could see his imprint being on this team, was the mindset and mentality off the ice and in the media. Whether it was answering questions, if it was in interviews, if it was just how you saw them in pregame or at practice or whatever it was, there was more of a business-like approach. Like, we're here to work. We're here to compete and build towards the ultimate goal of winning the Stanley Cup. And that felt different than like this fun party, like yacht club vibe that we had seen instilled in these guys before. And like, I'm not trying to be some old man yells at cloud type of guy who's saying you can't have music at practice, but like, we're talking about this team had, I don't know if you guys saw this stuff. They would have like 2 to 3 pads going at the same time. Some guys are practicing there. Some guys are practicing on this one. We got guys doing skill stuff here, skating stuff there, team stuff here. Music's playing at all of them. Like, that stuff's fine for the most part, but it was just like, it wasn't this team goal and structure and focus. And Craig Berube kind of came in and was like, we're not doing that anymore. We are together from the moment we get here to the moment we leave. It's serious. It's business. Let's focus. Let's pay attention. And let's make sure that we are showing up every day and taking this seriously. And I think that was like one of the mindset things that we saw change, where it was like, this is way better than anything we've had before.
Zach, I got a question for you, and this might be an outlandish one, so I want you guys to either call me out on it or everyone in the comments call me out on it if you think I'm being crazy here. Do you think Austin Matthews might have performed better, since we were talking about the playoffs? Do you think he might have performed better in the playoffs without the C on his chest a couple of years ago than in the past, like couple recent seasons where he's had a little bit more pressure?
So the short answer is yes. He performed better without the C on his jersey in the playoffs in years past. I think, offensively at least. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The pushback I'll give you, where I would say you're wrong in this sense, I think he's dealing with some type of significant injury. I don't know what it is, but like I don't think that it's broken fingers or hurt hand or like something like that. Like I think there's something deeper going on here. When he went out and did his exit interviews and his locker clean out, one of the things that he talked about, he again still won't tell us what the injury is. I don't know. Like Matthew Tkachuk comes out and tells us his adductor is torn off the bone and he's got hernias, and Austin Matthews can't tell us what it is that he's dealing with. I don't know if it's just because that's going to be a recurring injury or whatever it is, but it seems like he's dealing with something serious. He seems to believe he'll be fine by the start of next season. So, I mean, fingers crossed as a Leafs fan that is the case. But I do think that there's an element here where it's like he's playing through something that's hindering him more so than it is like the pressure of wearing the C here is weighing on him. So that's where I'll push back on you. But I would also agree and say, like, yes, he did perform better offensively, at least maybe chance generation or capitalization in years past than what we saw from him this year. But again, like we saw it in his defensive play, we saw it in face-offs, if we want to use those and rely on that. He was still good in those areas. So I don't think like the pressure of the C really got to him like that.
Right. Yeah, no, I went to college in Toronto with a bunch of Leafs fans the past couple of years. So it's always been a conversation that we've had. Should Matthews have the C or whatnot? But I think it's on the right guy.
Yeah, I think it's fine to be on him. Like, I'm not going to push back on that, really. I'll say this. Maybe this is controversial. I don't know. But it's on the right guy given who they have in the locker room.
Yeah. Okay.
There's not any other guy that I'm like, that's the alpha, that's the big dog, that's the guy who's got to wear the C in there, outside of Tavares, who I think is a great captain. Okay, he's not going to wear it anymore. You're passing it on. You're passing the torch. You're moving on here. It's going to Matthews. Fine, no problem. You do that. I think that the way they handled it was fine as well. JT's going to free agency. If he's got the C, you probably feel more pressure as a Leafs fan, as the Leafs organization, Leafs GM, Brad Treliving, to be like, maybe we've got to bring this guy back because he is the captain. We don't want to see this as disrespect. And then he leaves. Then now all of a sudden you just have an awkward-ish switch off where it's like our old captain's gone. He left. We got to give it to a new guy in the next summer. That allowed them to have like a year of overlap. Matthews can learn about being the captain, how to handle these things from JT, have that advice. And then if JT leaves, it's like, okay, he wasn't the captain anymore. See you later. It is what it is. Right. But I would say, I sometimes, throughout the last couple of years, even when JT was wearing the captaincy, that I think they might be missing the kind of leader you need to go over the top and the kind of guy you need to drag you into the fight, because I don't know that John Tavares, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Morgan Riley were those guys. I'm not in the room, so I can't definitively say that. I don't know what they say, what they don't say, whatever. But I look at Sasha Barkov and the way he plays, and then you look at the leaders he's insulated with, who are the best players on the team. They're not guys that you brought in who are veterans like Jumbo Joe and Patrick Marleau or Jason Spezza who are playing on your fourth line. It's Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, Aaron Ekblad, they're the best players on the team. And they are going to drag you into the fight, even if you don't want to be. Same with Colorado and Gabe Landeskog and Nathan McKinnon, outspoken, intense, whatever. McDavid, Draisaitl, same thing with those guys. I don't know that the personalities of the guys here have that. Maybe that's part of what they're missing. But yeah, I do think of the guys you have in the room, Matthews is probably the right guy to be wearing the C.
Well, let's talk a little bit about a guy that's not going to be in the room anymore, and we all know who that is, Mitch Marner. If you're Marner, do you have a couple places that you might be pinpointing on a map?
Yeah, it's Marek's brought them up. I think the one that's the most obvious is Carolina. I think more so because they've had the interest in him throughout. I don't know what the interest is from his side. We know that there was that trade that was proposed ahead of the trade deadline where he would have been sent to Carolina with some involvement of Mikko Rantanen and who knows what else, and he decided not to waive his no movement clause. That's fine. That's his right. It sucks for Leafs fans as we're going to watch him leave and knowing what Mikko Rantanen, A, ended up signing for, and B, what he did in his playoff run with Dallas. But that's one that I would be interested in keeping an eye on. I think they're going to pursue. The other one that's been brought up here is Vegas, and it seems like Vegas is kind of quickly climbing the leaderboard of where he may end up. I think it fits in a few ways. Competitiveness, they're cutthroat, they're willing to pay money and just gas guys like, you don't work here, see ya, you're done. They're willing to do that stuff. They don't care. There's no personal ties. There's no loyalty. Like, they just want to win. And also cap space coming open. I don't know the health of Alex Pietrangelo. He seemed to be fighting through it at the end of the year. Skipped out on Four Nations. Who knows how they handle that in this offseason, what he ends up doing, whatever. So maybe they open some stuff up there as well. But the other ones, obviously Anaheim, I don't know how likely that would be because I think they'd pay him a lot, but I don't know that they're that close to winning, which I think is kind of important to him here. And then the other one that would just make me absolutely sick, which Jeff just continues to bring up, and it'll drive me off a cliff if this happens, is the Florida Panthers. Oh. Now, I will say and caveat that with, if he does go there, I don't think it fits and it works. Like, I hold that belief. So there's part of me that would think, like, okay, maybe if he goes there, it doesn't work and it kind of tanks them, and then that's okay for us as Leafs fans. The other thing is, if he does fall into line, maybe is the best way to put it, then we're dealing with a problem. Because he wouldn't here in Toronto. You could see that. There seemed to be some sort of sense of entitlement. I don't know whether that was just because of what they paid him, the lack of accountability held by the organization to them. But whatever it was, he kind of had this I'm larger than life persona the entire time he was here, and wouldn't say, I didn't play well. It was always like, I'm doing the right things, it'll work. It was all that kind of stuff. That doesn't fly in Florida. The backhand, no-look pass from your own blue line through the neutral zone that's going to the far blue line in a playoff game, it doesn't work in Florida. They won't let you do that. If he buys in, yeah, it'll be a scary situation for him to be in with the Panthers, but I don't know. It's interesting to continue to watch this Marner saga unfold, because everything that it seems like he's doing in free agency here as well, by the way, it just kind of reinforces what we thought was happening in Toronto. Like, he's going to go on some tour this summer. He's going to go visit every single team. I get that you're entitled to do that, but he's like the only free agent, and this is a very woe is me type of moment. Like, I'm the belle of the ball. Everybody look at me. Let's make the news about me for the next month because I'm the big pretty target that everybody wants to get. And that just kind of screams everything that he's done and shown us here in Toronto the entire time, and also why I don't think he would fit with the Florida Panthers.
Now, I've seen this number kind of rumored around, and I know it would take a team that's not as competitive probably to offer him this, but I've seen the number 13, 14 million thrown around for Marner if he goes to maybe a less competitive team like the Chicago Blackhawks or something like that. Do you think the high stakes money would bring him in, or do you think Marner wants to win?
I think he wants to win, but I think there's a balance here that, again, like, I don't know this for sure. I'm just kind of more so making assumptions. I think there's a balance here that would also be, how close are you? Like, if Chicago and Anaheim, let's say, come to him and they offer him the same thing, maybe he feels like Chicago's closer because they have Connor Bedard.
Right.
Right.
Maybe that's something that he factors into that decision. And he looks at the pipeline that they've got in the sales that they give him, sales pitch that they give him, and he says, yep, I feel closer that way. I feel more likely that we can get to a point of winning with that. I also feel like he does want to make the most money. He did it in Toronto. It would seem a little bit disingenuous if he doesn't. So there's an element to my thinking that's like, I kind of feel like he'll be selfish and be like, I want the most money in the NHL. I want to say that I made the most money in the NHL. I want my contract to be bigger than Leon Draisaitl's. And if Anaheim offers me 14.25 and Chicago offers me 13.75, I'm going to Anaheim. Like, it's kind of hard. I feel like he's going to chase money no matter what. But as for the winning, I think he does want to win. I just don't know where he's ranking it in his or how much emphasis he's putting on the winning now in his decision that he's about to make.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'm interested to see where he goes. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is going to be the one thing that everybody's tracking all summer, as long as this goes. And I mean, not surprising that he's dragging this thing out as long as he can.
100%.
It's true. Okay, we got a question from our boy Big Willie Styles. He wants to know where is John Tavares going to go?
I think he'll probably re-sign in Toronto.
Yeah.
Look, the Matt Duchene contract for me would be something that I would go to him and basically say, he's younger than you. He had more points than you last year. He just signed for 4 years at $4.5 million. It's not a direct comparable. We can talk about the state tax stuff all we want, but like 4.5 in Dallas is obviously not 4.5 in Toronto. There's a difference.
No.
I mean, if we want to, if you ever wanted to say that things were different there or there's like some type of issue that maybe needs to address, that's probably like a perfect example that a guy who makes or scores more and is younger is going to get paid less than a guy who doesn't because of the tax situation. Then, well, maybe there's your answer. But I think that's a comparable. I just think that the Leafs need to finally, for one of the first times in the Tavares, Marner, Matthews, Nylander era, lay down the law on somebody. And maybe it's JT. But if he comes to you and he says he needs 5.5, I think you say no. And you just say, we'll do 5. Because if you go, okay, yeah, we'll wiggle. We'll do the 5.5. Where does it stop? And then what happens when Nyes calls you and says that he wants, you were going to give me 7.5. I'll take 8. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Well, now you're just doing what you've just done before. I think this needs to be one of those ones, as much as I would like JT to stay here, I think he wants to be here. I think the team wants him here. I do think he ultimately ends up here. They need to be cautious with the number that he does sign at. And I mean, like, I saw Craig Button the other day was talking about the Stamkos deal and what he did in Nashville and about how he went and got all the money. Like, that's great. You can do that if you want to. I don't think the team that's going to sign him to do that is going to be close to winning. You saw what just happened with Stamkos. So I think he needs to be careful with some of that stuff as well. But otherwise, I think if he's going to stay in a competitor or wants to stay in Toronto, which also would be a competitor there as well, it would probably be around 5. And I do think that happens.
Let's turn to the crease for a second, Zach. I know you might not be a goaltending expert, but none of us are. Do you think Stolarz played well enough this season to start and earn himself that starting job? Or do you think Wall is still there as a 1B? Is this still a 1A, 1B kind of thing?
I do think he did. I do think he played well enough. I'll start there and answer that question. I do think he played well enough. The thing I feel like this team is fortunate with having these two guys is that they're also in different age positions and different points in their careers, where you're not looking at Stolarz being in his 30s and Joseph Woll being in his 30s and being like, ooh, who do we pick? How do we figure this out? If Stolarz needs to start and take the brunt of it for the beginning, and Woll gets comfortable and gets built into it, and then all of a sudden he can take off and he can be your number one, I think that's fine. I don't think there's any issue or rush on that. We're talking about a goaltender who's in his mid-20s, right? That's okay. You can develop a little bit later. I think Stolarz did a great job. I think he earns his spot, but I think that these guys aren't going to be committed to one guy being the number one. And I think it very easily could flip back and forth where next year we look at it and Stolarz is solely the one and it's not 1A, 1B, or Joseph Woll is solely the one. And again, Stolarz just goes and he's the backup. I don't think there's any issue with that. I think they're pretty comfortable with the goaltending spot that they're in right now. And I kind of think this actually just works out for the better. This is one of the first times, and it's back-to-back seasons here now, where I'm watching the goaltending, and I've got no panic basically with these guys. I'm comfortable going in the off season, comfortable going into playoffs, comfortable going into the next summer as well, where it's hey, we don't need to go out there and find some guy desperately, maybe like the Edmonton Oilers will be doing this summer.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's safe to say that Stolarz and Woll will probably both be around for at least the next few seasons.
Yeah, I can't remember what Stolar's contract is. I think he was 3 years. But I mean, they signed it was two-year contract. So yeah, I guess this is the second year of it. I don't see why they wouldn't extend him if he has another season similar to what he just put up. Mind you, he's making $2.5 million right now, and if he does what he just did this year, he's not going to make $2.5 million on his next contract. So that would be another area to look at. But the one thing that I kind of wonder here about how they go about this, and one thing I think that they would hope for as well, is you want Joseph Woll to come through and be your number one. His contract expires when he's 29 years old. It expires in 2028. He's a UFA. But you have two goaltenders that are coming up through the Marlies right now. And I think they've done a pretty good job here now of identifying these homegrown goaltenders. Who knows how it transfers to the next level? But, I mean, I'm probably going to say his name wrong, and you guys can correct me if I do. I think it's Akhtamov. He's there right now, and he was a beast with the Marlies. Dennis Hildeby's there as well, and he's put up 2 pretty decent seasons. He struggled with the Leafs this year, but, again, young goaltender, making the leap. These guys maybe just need some time. And I think that I've seen some stuff, whether it's on the LeafsNation.com and these guys writing there, but they've done a pretty good job of identifying some of the foreign goaltenders as well, maybe playing in the Swedish and Swiss leagues or the Finnish league or Russian leagues, and trying to get these guys to come through. So I feel like you get Woll to one spot. Maybe you start building these other guys through. Maybe the need for Stolarz to stay here past this season isn't that high. And if he comes up and all of a sudden he wants $3.5-4 mil on the next one, maybe you don't need him that badly. And a real benefit that you could find out of this, again, it's so hard to find goalies. If you get yourself where you've got 2, someone might desperately want that guy. And someone might be willing to move on from a piece. What if the Oilers are calling you this summer and asking you about either one of the guys that you're holding on to right now? And they're looking for Anthony Stolarz to come in, be a veteran, and be a guy who can help Stuart Skinner and take a load off his plate, and maybe be their one because they saw what they could do. Well, maybe get picks. Maybe you get a player off their roster. Maybe you steal somebody from them and you can open that up. Like, they're kind of in a position right now where they have a luxury of these 2 goaltenders, which is something they've not really had in a long time. But I do think that they probably end up extending Stolarz, but there's no guarantee, and it's like kind of a comforting feeling for me right now seeing the goalie situation that they're in.
Well, I've got one more kicker for you, Zach, before we end things here. I did snipe these off your Twitter this morning. I just wanted to know what you thought of this. Is McDavid coming to Toronto? How high are the chances? Let me get your thoughts on it.
I don't think they're that high. I'll be honest. He's from the same hometown that I am. He played for the same minor hockey organization. So, like, I saw him all the way through. I watched him play, knew who this guy was when we were like 9 years old. Like, I've always known and seen. And then when he got to the NHL, or when he was getting drafted, I guess I should say, it was like the hope was the Leafs are going to win it. And I think if we look back, whatever it was, the combination of lottery balls, I think they were 1 lottery ball away from actually getting him. So it's like just extra devastation if you're a Leafs fan. But I don't think it's actually that high. I think there's more of a chance. Okay, so I'll start here so that I make sure that I get myself the words in the right order. I think it's more likely that he signs in Edmonton again. Whether that's 4-year deal or 8-year deal, I don't know. But I think it's more likely that he signs in Edmonton again. Now, what I will say is, I think the door is not just cracked open. I think it's pretty wide open that he tests free agency, or at least tells the Oilers he will test free agency. Again, he may return. He may sign that 4-year deal. He may sign before July 1 and do an 8-year deal. He may make it to July 1 and only be able to sign a 7-year. But I feel like that door is wide open for him to test. And if you are Brad Treliving, Keith Pelly, MLSE, you are backing up the Brinks truck. You are calling Connor McDavid, and you are telling him, whatever you need, whatever you want, you can have it. And I'll give the sales pitch that I think they should be having. The Stanley Cup hasn't been won in Toronto since 1967. Stanley Cup hasn't been brought to Canada since 1993. He came awfully close with Edmonton. 1 game away last year, 2 wins away this year. His legacy and winning is going to be something that's very important because he's going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time. If he wants to go down as the greatest player of all time and put himself into a territory of hockey players that has not even been touched, winning in Toronto as the number 1 guy would put him on a pedestal that, like, it's not fair to say that Gretzky and Crosby aren't at or can't get to, or Messier or whatever, like these guys, but it would be otherworldly, the experience that he would have if he won a Stanley Cup in Toronto and he was the kid who came home and did it. He's the best player in the world. Maybe he finishes his career as the best player ever, but you want to talk about legacy? Winning here would be like, they will write fairy tales about you. Like, they will have, as Brian Burke had said, schools named after you. Like, there will be streets and schools and subs and like Brad Marchand has a Dairy Queen named after him. Like, they will change every McDonald's downtown Toronto to be called McDavid's, like, until the day he dies.
Sankofa Square, it was Young and Dundas Square. It'll probably get renamed to McDavid Square. Honestly, if they win
seriously though, yeah. Like he
like
will
Bremner
be
Boulevard, McDavid Boulevard.
100%, and like that's not even an exaggeration. Like, he wins here, his name will be on anything and everything he wants for the rest of his life and beyond. He will be on Legends Row. He will be in the rafters. It won't matter. Like, he won't pay for a meal, a car, a hotel forever. His family might not pay for any of that ever if he won here. So like, that's the sales pitch. You know, yeah, you would be a legend and an icon with the Rangers, with the Kings, with the Bruins, the Flyers, like those franchises. I'm not diminishing at all. But you combine just the fact that this team, this fan base, this organization is so desperate to win, and the fact that he's from here. It would be guys. It would be shit we've never seen. Like there would be like the Ford Performance Center is here in Toronto. That's the practice rink. Like Ford would be naming cars after this guy. Like we wouldn't even know what to do. It would be nuts. So that's my pitch to him. Do I think he comes here? I don't know. 1% chance I give it. Like the door's open right now. Maybe that grows as we go on. Right now, maybe 1%. Do I want it to happen? Seeing that interview yesterday, that post season press conference there was some excitement that was coursing through my veins watching that unfold. Saying that being said, those words, I fall asleep thinking about that.
All right,
no, go ahead, Colton.
No, I got one more question for you, and then we're gonna let you go. Is there who's one player you want the Leafs to go after in free agency?
I think Brad Marchand, but I think within reason. This team has had a history. I'd say outside of like the last 5 years, they've had a history of signing guys who are past their prime to contracts that are too big. You look at the Marleau deal, like. They had to get out of that by trading a first-round pick that turned into Seth Jarvis just to get out of 1 year of Patrick Marleau. Jason Spezza I thought was good here, but it was never what it was going to be billed to be just because he was old and past his prime. And Thornton and Marleau didn't work like that. You look at when we were kids and stuff, and you look at the guys that they brought in, it was just older players, mid to late 30s, kind of at the end, getting paid, come back to Toronto, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't work. You got to be careful. I think Brad Marchand has hockey left to give here, but if you're going to go nuts and you're going to sign this guy at like 8.5, 3, 4 years, you might be putting yourself in a corner by doing that. Because maybe he's got 1 year of really good hockey and 2 years of okay hockey. Maybe he does have 3 years of really, really good hockey, and maybe we're all wrong and we'll find out. But right now, you just don't want to put yourself in a position because of how excited you got seeing what he did in the playoffs where he was second in Conn Smythe voting. Like, you don't want to back yourself into that. That's one that I would look at. I would be really interested in Aaron Ekblad. And again, another Florida Panther, but I would be very interested. The problem with Ekblad is that if you're going to do that, you have to find a way to get out of Morgan Rielly. He's got a full no move, and he doesn't want to move. So I think that that's unlikely, but a lot of it is because you need a guy now to run your power play. Morgan Rielly, they very clearly decided wasn't that guy. They had Mitch Marner run it. Oh, Mitch Marner's gone. So now what? Like, who's the guy who's going to run it? So you need to find a guy to be able to do that. Outside of that, like, I'll say right now, I think Brandon Tanev will be a Maple Leaf. I think we're going to see both Tanev brothers playing here. I like him. I wanted him at the deadline. It wasn't like a guy that I was going nuts over, but I would have liked him at the deadline. Bottom six guy. I think he fits kind of everything Brad Treliving's looking for. So I do think Brandon Tanev ends up here. I don't know. There's not really many guys on this free agent class that I'm like, you got to go get that guy. Like, they're all sitting there next year. It's Kirill Kaprizov, Kyle Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel. They're all next year. It's not this year. This is the wrong year to have Mitch Marner go and leave because those guys are all coming up next year.
I agree. Well, Zach, we've kept you for quite a while. We really appreciate this, man. You guys, all of us, you guys can go check them out over at Leafs Morning Take. And obviously the Sheet with Jeff Marek, is that's where Zach produces and also does his own talking and stuff there. And Jeff bugs him about Marner going to Florida. But Zach, thanks again. We really appreciate this. We're going to have to get you back on this summer once some Leafs signings happen and once some stuff gets going in that direction.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I've seen your numbers are going through the roof here, so I'm glad for you guys. Keep doing it and getting some great guests on as well. So, and I know Colton told me you got a pretty good one coming up next week, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you guys having me on here. Thanks for taking the time, and yeah, I mean, I guess watch the sheet at 3 o'clock today.
Damn
There
right.
you go. Take care, Zach.
You're muted.
Happens to the best of us. Happened to you yesterday. That was a great interview with Zach. But without further ado, we have Brad Schlossman of the Grand Forks Herald waiting backstage. So let's bring him on. Brad, how's it going today?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Not too bad. Not too
Good.
bad.
Thanks for waiting through that. We appreciate that.
All good.
Let's start with the big news out of the NHL this morning with former North Dakota player Jonathan Toews going back to Winnipeg. What was, I guess the big question is what has Toews' impact been with North Dakota since he's left?
Well, I think there was a stretch there when UND was recruiting Canadians. That was kind of their when a lot of Canadians know the CHL, and college is a little bit not on their radar when they're growing up. They're around CHL games. And, Jonathan Toews went and played at the World Juniors. He had that shootout where he kept scoring and ended up going and winning gold. And all of a sudden, I think everyone, North Dakota got on everyone's radar because where is this Jonathan Toews playing? Oh, it's North Dakota. And for the first, there were several years after that, a Canadian player would commit here. And I'd say, well, what's your background on college hockey? When did you become aware of it? And they said, well, I watched Jonathan Toews at the World Juniors. And then, of course, he went on and had such an unbelievable career, captaining 3 Stanley Cup teams and, becoming such a prominent player that everyone knew Jonathan Toews. But I think he opened some doors for North Dakota recruiting-wise. And I think that's where we're kind of at right now in the same situation in college hockey. Now, with UND grabbing guys like Keaton Verhoff and Cole Reshny as everything opens up with the CHL recruiting, I have a feeling that could be another Jonathan Toews moment. And I'm guessing in, 7 years, I'm going to do a story about a commit. And, I'm going to say, how'd you learn about college hockey? And he's going to say, well, I know Keaton Verhoff went there, or I know Cole Reshny went there. So it's kind of interesting, the timing of Jonathan Toews to be back in the news. And, it was a really big, it really felt when Verhoff and Reshny committed a lot like the Jonathan Toews thing, because he was the first #1 overall pick in the CHL to never play in the CHL. And he might still be, I don't even know. So it was like a huge deal that he ended up choosing college. And, I think Reshny and Verhoff were the first 2 really big names to commit to college. So that was kind of a big story across Canada and the US. So kind of some parallels there.
Yeah, Brad, I noticed you put out a tweet about an hour or so ago, and it was that Jonathan Toews is 7 points away from passing Zach Parise as the all-time top NHL point scorer for UND alumni. How big would that be for Toews to kind of take that spot, and how big would it be for UND as well?
I'm guessing Johnny has no idea about that. It's kind of funny. So you look at the top of the guys on that list, like Toews and Parise and Oshie and Travis Zajac, and they're all guys who are kind of the same, and they, in the sense that those guys are just so passionate about winning games. And I don't really think that they sit there and check their point status and stuff like that. So I'm guessing if I tell Jonathan that, he'll have absolutely no idea about that. So, Brock Nelson's going to be another one that hits 1,000 NHL games played next season as alums. Yeah, I'm guessing none of these guys even know that, but it's kind of fun to see where they stack up.
Now we talked about NCAA to CHL stuff, Verhoff and Reshny coming down. I know the Ralph Engelstad is a great place to play hockey, but what does University of North Dakota offer to these young players that some other schools might not offer?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think with the CHL opening up, again, I go back to familiarity. And North Dakota is one of those schools who the Western Canadian kids all know about because UND has recruited Western Canada so heavy over the last 40 years that they might have. So I'm trying to remember if it was Reshny or Verhoff told me that, well, yeah, he had, or no, I think it was Cooper Williams, actually. Cooper Williams is going to be a draft pick next year. A very good player for the Saskatoon Blades. And Cooper Williams told me, well, I had a camp with Jacob Bernard-Docker. Well, Jacob Bernard-Docker, first-round pick, is from Alberta. So, they have interactions with them. A lot of guys go back and live in Western Canada who played here. So that's one of the schools that some of these Western Canadian players do have familiarity with, first of all. Then I think when you come to the recruiting battle, it's, there are 12,000 fans at every game. In North America, North Dakota drew more fans per game than any team outside of the NHL last season, and including more than one NHL team. When you look at the development piece, the arena has a lot of amenities. Players have ice there whenever they want to get it. They have a brand new weight facility. They can train in an altitude room. They have sports scientists on staff to track that stuff. They have a rest and recovery room with all sorts of, red light beds and just ways to take care of your body, ways to build strength. So I think when you're looking at how am I going to develop for the next level and you see all these resources, you're like, wow, like that, you're not going to even get these at the NHL level. So I think that's an attractive part. I think, travel is pretty easy. They either bus or if it's a longer trip, they fly on a charter plane. That is the team. It's like an NHL team. They're the only people on the plane is the team. They have a chef at the arena that cooks meals there for them. So they know what nutrition they're getting. They're on nutrition programs. So I think it's just this comprehensive package. And then I think the last piece of it that people don't really talk about is college in general is kind of fun. And these guys are around their peers. They have student sections at the game. They get to hang out with other college students on campus. They live with all their best friends. They're not at like a billet house. You're living with your teammates, you're with your buddies all the time. And I think that's really what is going to, in the future, why those kids are all going to end up coming down. Because the kids that do this first year, they're going to call back to their buddies and say, oh my goodness, college is unbelievable. Like, you guys have to try to get here. So, and then the last piece I think is that a lot of these guys, they've been there and done that with the CHL. They're not necessarily choosing, I think we're talking about it like they're choosing college over the CHL, which I guess they are, but they've already been to the CHL too. They experienced both. They've already been there 2 or 3 years, and now they're ready for the next thing. Some kids are going to be ready to come in when they're 18, like Reshny is. A lot of kids aren't going to be ready till they're 19. Some aren't going to be ready till they're 20. So some kids are going to age out and then come, but like some of the high-end kids, like a Cole Reshny, he's ready for college hockey. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but those are kind of all the prongs why I think guys are going to come down.
You touched on the student Oh, sorry, Colton. You touched on the student section there for a second. I just want to bring this up because we had Chase Fisher from Penn State come on yesterday, and I asked him about the student section there. I know I saw a video on Spittin' Chicklets where they were lining up outside of the Ralph Engelstad, the students. They were in tents. They were sleeping overnight. And then as soon as the doors open at 6 o'clock, they were sprinting in. Have you got to experience that, or have you seen that in person at all?
Oh yeah. Every time you pull up to the arena, I get there 2 hours early, 2.5 hours early, somewhere around there. And there's, the lines all the way, it lines up all the way down the building. And then where the players park, their lot kind of is adjacent to where they line up. So when the players come in, like they're walking past all these students, like sitting there waiting to get into the game. And yeah, I mean, college atmospheres are just different than anything. You know, I heard that from a player who came down once on a visit who had no intention of playing college hockey. And he was like, well, I got a free trip out of it for a visit. And he came down and he said, the students were going crazy. They were chanting. They had bands playing. And he was like, I've never seen anything like this. And he ended up coming here and ended up going on and playing in the NHL. So I think, yeah, the atmosphere is certainly unlike anything else.
You touched on the band there for a second. I know I've been to some other sporting events that provide bands, or there's people in the crowd that they have their own instruments. Hockey in North America is not like that at all, other than at the college level. Do you think that that is something that like other leagues or other teams could experiment with?
Maybe it would be interesting to see where these are students. They're part of the students section that they just are in the band, and that's part of their extracurricular. I'm not sure. Maybe someone would try to replicate that. That probably isn't a bad idea, because they certainly add to the atmosphere in the arena, and a lot of those bands lead the chants and stuff that go on in college. And every atmosphere is a little bit different. You go from arena to arena, and they all have kind of their own chants they do, and it's different every place. So it's definitely a unique experience.
Were Verhoff and Reshny's commitments a shock to you or to anybody, or was it something that was kind of building?
They weren't a shock. To me, they were a shock that they happened together. I was like, wait a sec, they got Reshny, but wait, Verhoff also the same. Like, I knew those were their top two guys. So they needed a forward and a D for sure, a center and a D. And those were the guys they said, these are going to be our priority guys. They identified them both on and off the ice as guys they felt were going to be really good fits. And so I knew they were recruiting them, so I don't want to say it was a shock, but you also wonder, like, is it actually going to happen? Or they, I just wasn't sure how it was going to play out. So I wouldn't say it was a shock, because I knew they were going after them. And I felt just, Cole Reshny had like 25 points in 10 playoff games this year. Is he going back to that league next year?
Yeah, no,
he's already dominating that league. I'm like, he's ready for a bigger challenge to me. So that's kind of why I thought, I just didn't know where he would end up or how it would play out. But I think it was a bigger shock to others than it was to me. But I don't want to say like I expected it to happen by any means. I knew that was what they wanted to have happen. And, usually it doesn't play out exactly like you want it to have happen. In this case, it did for North Dakota.
That's good, though. And yeah, I guess, it was a bigger shock for Victoria probably and their fans.
Yeah. Yeah, because they hadn't, the CHL really had, I know Malcolm Spence had announced to Michigan, but really there weren't a lot of the high-end guys that had announced yet. And I was kind of expecting, I think some of them didn't want to upset their teams during the middle of the season. They didn't want to take visits during the season because they were playing. So a lot of these guys were like in the USHL, it's just kind of the norm there in the USHL. So they'll go take a visit on a Monday or Tuesday after a game and then come back or something, or that just doesn't happen this year in the CHL. So a lot of these guys like Reshny and Verhoff, they took their visit after the season ended. And so I think you're still going to see more guys that are coming down. I think the second pillar to this is that there are probably some guys at the top of the draft that are interested in playing in the NHL this upcoming year. And they're going to go through the draft. They're going to talk to their team. And I'm curious if some of their GMs say, hey, look, you're probably not going to make our team this year. You should play college 1 year and then we'll sign you after the year. And then that guy will go commit. So I obviously we're waiting to see where Gavin McKenna chooses. He's going to be one that comes down to NCAA. But I think you're going to see a few others that are kind of at the top of the draft. And then I think you're going to see some others that are mid-table in the draft that are going to go back to the CHL because they need another year of development before college hockey's tough. Like you have older guys. Like go look at some of the numbers of some of these guys. You know, Dean Letourneau is a first-round pick. What did he have, 1 or 2 points this year at BC? Like,
yeah.
It can be tough if you're not ready. Like it's some guys who come down who have put up 1.5 points per game in the CHL or 1 point per game in the CHL. They're going to come down, and it's going to be an eye-opening thing for them because guys just don't put up those numbers in college. So it'll be interesting to see how some of those guys handle it.
Brad, UND has a long list of alumni that have gone on to play in the NHL. I want to know what team over the years has kind of been your favorite, or what season was your favorite to cover as a reporter? For
North Dakota?
Yes.
You know, I would say there are several of them that stand out. If I had to choose one, in 2015-16, North Dakota ended up winning the national championship. Their first line was Brock Besser, Nick Schmaltz, and Drake Kajula. And those guys did something like every night that you were just shaking your head at. The plays they made, they did something you had never seen every night. So like as a writer, you're getting to all this content. Their D-core that year, they had Tucker Poolman, who played in the NHL, Troy Stetcher, who's still in the NHL.
They had Colton Poolman as well, didn't they?
He came the next year.
Oh, okay.
So Colton missed it by 1 year. Yeah, Paul Ledoux played in they have 4 NHL defensemen. Christian Wolanin's played in the NHL, and he's a game away from winning the Calder Cup with Abbotsford right now. But yeah, I mean that they had depth, but really it was that top line, and then UND also had another top line in 06-07 that was Ryan Duncan, who won the Hobey Baker Award, and his line mates were TJ Oshie and Jonathan Taves, and those guys were just like extremely dominant, and so those lines stand out to me. And then there's a team in 2010-11 that was pretty good. They didn't have the NHL names the others did, but they were just really dominant college players. Here's how good they were. Brock Nelson was on that team. He was on the third line.
Damn.
Brock Nelson as a college hockey player on the third line just seems hard to imagine.
That's how good that team was. In Carter Rowney, who won the Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins, he was on the fourth line. So that team was just incredible. They ended up losing in the semifinals 1-0. Maybe it was 2 with an empty netter. But they outshot Michigan 40-20 and lost, one of those type of games. But yeah, no, that team was incredible. So those were probably the 3 best teams that I recall. And there's the year the pandemic happened, they had an 800 winning percentage and the season got canceled. So that one, we never got to see the final chapter to that season, what it would have been.
I just want to touch on this for a second because you brought up that first line of Besser, Schmaltz, and Kajula. I don't know if anyone has seen this, Colton or Brad or any of our viewers in the chat, but there was one play specifically, and I knew this was going to come up. It was a play that all 5 players on the ice for North Dakota touched that puck before it went into the back of the net. I forget who they were playing, but it was such a beautiful tic-tac-toe plus 2 more. Like, yeah, I remember that play vividly from that season.
Yeah, just Google like North Dakota tic-tac-toe. It was against Miami, and like there were like 9 puck touches in like 4 seconds.
Yeah, it was insane.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and Nick Schmaltz ended up scoring it. It was his first goal of the year, actually. And then his last goal of the year was in the semifinals against Denver, where the game was tied with a minute to go, and he scored to give them the lead for good. Brock Besser and Drake Kajula were the ones that scored all the goals on that line. Nick Schmaltz set them up. But when Nick Schmaltz scored, they were some big ones that year.
Let's
I got
touch
one
on.
more for you.
Oh, sorry, Colton.
One
Go
second.
ahead.
I got one more because I still want to talk about Reshny and Verhoff just for a second. Just because, what do you think their the expectation is of them this season, considering, they're higher end players, and like you said, they were the first of that higher end caliber to commit to NCAA and leave the CHL.
North Dakota is going to put Reshny in a big situation. They needed a top 6 center, and that was who they targeted. So he is going to be penciled in for big minutes. I think he's going to be a really key player on the power play. He's going to see a lot of ice this year. Keaton Verhoff is a younger player. Like, he had to accelerate high school to come in. He's not even draft eligible for another year. And North Dakota has a really good D-core, which I think is going to be great for Verhoff because they can kind of they don't need to throw him out to the wolves right away. Like, you can ease any young defender, let him get some confidence, build that up, and just see where he takes it. And I would guess he's a guy who is going to be significantly better in March than he is in October. And I think he's ready. I think he's ready to be an everyday player in October. But I think he might be a difference maker as the season goes on, and not just a mid-pair D that helps out. But he's going to really make a difference, because young players in college hockey, it's not easy. It can be tough. And so I think, especially at the defense position, but he's a special player. They think he's a special kid off the ice too, and a kid that can handle it.
Okay. Yeah, I watched them both this past year with Victoria, and when they came through Kamloops, I worked for the Kamloops Blazers as well. When they came through Kamloops, like they were just two incredible players to watch. Just Verhoff didn't even look like he was 16 years old out there half the time. Just incredible. So I'm excited to see, especially Verhoff, how he takes that next step in college and handles it, because he's going to be a special player.
Yeah, and he's a guy who, maybe he ends up playing 2 years at North Dakota, because he'll play his first year, get drafted, then come back. That's kind of what I would anticipate the path being. That's kind of a path that's been set by some of the high-end college guys. Cale Makar played 2 years after his draft year, actually, and he had just an unbelievable transition to NHL. Quinn Hughes played. All the Hughes played 2 years, but his brother did too as well at Michigan. I'm just trying to think. Owen Power was a 2-year guy. Jake Sanderson was a 2-year guy. Like, so that's kind of been the guys who transitioned the best to the NHL play 2 years. So I think that will probably be his development path. But yeah, it seems like Reshny's a pretty smart player. I mean, you've seen him more than I have, and I think smart players are ones that can adapt to college. So it'll be interesting to watch. They're both going to get an opportunity to play quite a bit.
You're muted.
2 in a row. 2 quarters in the tip jar today, folks. One more for me, Brad, before we go. EJ Emery, I looked at his stats before. He played 31 games this year, only tallied 1 point. He was a 30th overall pick by the Rangers in 2024 with 40 penalty minutes this year. What do you think that EJ Emery has to kind of develop or change to his game to kind of get more on the offensive side?
Yeah, I think part of it, he had some bad luck offensively, and that was part of it. But I think he comes into college, and he's not going to be an offensive defenseman ever. Like, that's not his game. The Rangers drafted him to be a guy that kills plays, and he's a really elite skater. What he needs to do in the offseason is be building some strength, because right now he is not a very thick kid. And he's still very thin. I think as he develops and adds muscle onto his big frame, he's just going to be, harder and harder to play against. When I watched him in junior, he reminded me a little bit of Derek Forbort, who played here, where Forbort isn't flashy offensively, but no one can ever get around him. And he just shuts down rushes all the time. And what I think they want with EJ is he had his baseline game, and he was able to defend. He had to play big minutes. North Dakota had their top right shot D had a season-ending injury after Game 1 last year. So Emery played more minutes than all but one freshman in the NCHC last year. So he was playing a ton. And he was having to play against really good players. I think the next layer now is starting to bring out more offense in his game because he does have the skating ability. And I think some of that's going to come. I don't think that's going to be his calling card. I don't think he's going to be a guy who the Rangers ever pencil in as a power play guy. But I do think he can add some offense to his game as he gets older. I see him as a 3-year guy. I think, and I think the Rangers do too. At the draft last year, the Rangers brass flat out said that, like, this is not a guy on a short timeline. Like, we're drafting and developing and going to see what he becomes down the line here. But they did not envision EJ Emery as a guy that's going to be rushed out to the NHL. And I think he had a solid start to his college career, especially with the minutes and situations he had to play. A lot of these freshmen D are playing third pair and getting eased in. Not EJ. EJ got thrown into the fire last year. And at times he had his ups and downs too, which is, like I was talking about with Verhoff, very natural. Keaton's probably going to have his ups and downs early in the season next year. It's just how it goes with young defensemen. But I think there's a lot of tools there with EJ. And I think the defensive coach, Dylan Simpson, is really excited to continue working with him. And I think the offensive layer is now what he's going to start adding to his game, as well as he needs to keep building that strength. And because he can, despite not being really thick, he had times when he, wrestle guys to the ground, and he would finish off a hit and then drop a guy, and that's pretty good. Wait till he adds 20 pounds of muscle. Like, he's going to do that a lot more frequently.
Yeah, well, like you just said, add 20 pounds of muscle. He's 6'3", 185 right now. Over the next couple seasons at college, if he can get up to 200, 205, I think he'd be solid. He'd be a monster on the back end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what the Rangers are looking for from him. And North Dakota will keep working to develop those different areas. And but the tool set is very intriguing.
100%. I think he's going to be an interesting player for the Rangers coming up.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, Brad, we thank you for coming on today. This was a great episode. A nice 25 minutes, half hour with you. Anything else that you want to touch on, Colton, before we let Brad go?
No, we talked about a little bit about the McKenna stuff. I was just going to get your kind of thoughts on what you think not where he's going to go, but just what you think that does for NCAA hockey and having a, projected first overall franchise player come down.
Well, I think it probably starts some more dominoes. I think other players in Western Canada, when you see a guy like Gavin McKenna go, they all look around and say, should I be doing this too? And I think that in part probably started with Reshny and Verhoff. That's, when you start seeing more and more guys come down, it's just, you're going to continue to see that. So I think what we're seeing right now is the CHL is going to lose guys earlier than they have before. And I think right now they're trying to hang on to some of these guys and figuring out how they're going to hang on to them. I think others are realizing they're going to lose those guys, but it also now opens the door to Americans who want to play college hockey that would have never considered the CHL before. So now you are seeing more guys go up there that wouldn't have gone there, who want to play college hockey. So it's just different. They're not going to have the guys post draft year as often. The first rounders anyway. If you look at college rosters, a lot of like the 4th round picks and 5th round picks, a lot of those guys go back to the USHL after their draft year. So you will see guys who get drafted in the 2nd round this year go back to the CHL and then come to college at age 19. So you will see. So a lot of guys aren't ready to come to college at 18. It's very, very difficult. So I think you're going to see, the first round guys, a lot of those guys are ready at 18, and they're going to come down. Some of the mid round picks, they're going to go back for their 19 year. Some of the late round picks and the undrafted guys, they're going to go back for their 20-year-old year and then come down. So it'll just be different. And I think after they get through these first couple of years, it'll become kind of like the USHL, where the CHL teams just want to know for planning purposes and communicate with the colleges. What are you thinking? You guys, like Cooper Williams, for example, he's committed to North Dakota. He's going back to Saskatoon this year. During the season, Saskatoon's probably going to be saying, what are you planning? Is he coming in next year, or is he coming back? Like, try to keep us in the loop. Then they can plan out, do we need to go get a replacement? Is he coming back? How do we structure our roster the following year? And that's something college does with the NHL. They'll talk to the NHL teams. Are you going to sign our guy? Do we need to fill in this spot? Like, what are our chances getting him back? And so I think, just the lines of communication will open. And the tough part for the CHL teams this year is, hey, Victoria didn't know that these guys were gone until later. I guess they have time now to fill in, and they're probably going after, and here's the domino effect too. They're going to have Eli McCamey next year.
Mm-hmm.
AA wasn't open up. Eli McCamey never goes to Victoria. So it's a two-way street, right? Like, it's just different. But I think all the parties will adjust. And there will probably be some getting used to it the first couple of years for everybody.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory for everyone, right? So like you said, it's going to be an interesting few years until we kind of see what the full results of all of this will be. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be good for both parties at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's great for the players. They can choose they have more options now. I think it was tough for 15, 16-year-old kids who have to make a decision on where they're going to be playing at age 21, right? Because you had to choose CHL or NCAA when you're that young, and your decision at age 15 would affect what your options were at 20. Now it's changed, and now you have a guy who can do both if they want. They can do one. It's just there's so many more options for the players. So I think the players are the big winners in this.
Yeah, absolutely. We thank you very much for coming on, Brad. We'll have to get you back on sometime next season once Reshny and Verhoff have kind of cemented their feet with the with UND. Wow, spit it out. And we'll get you back on to kind of get some analysis of how they've been doing.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, all right, everyone, go follow Brad at Schlossman3 on X and go take a look at his work over at the Grand Forks Herald. Have a great one, Brad.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Colton, a great episode today. Zack Phillips in the morning, Brad Schlossman here in the afternoon. It's been great. A nice Friday. I almost called it Thursday, but this is the last day of the week.
It's Friday. There's no hockey on. We got Calder Cup final, I guess, though. So there's a bit of hockey on. The NHL draft's next Friday, so there's that to look forward to. Speaking of the NHL draft, we got a pretty big guest coming on Monday. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to spoil it, but you check out the socials on Sunday. Keep an eye out on our social media, on my social media as well, and we're going to be promoting it. But a big name player is going to be joining us to talk all things NHL draft. Thank you, Randy, for being here today. Thank you, Bill, as well, and Big Willie Styles, of course. Can't run this show without them.
Oh, one thing that came in from Randy in the middle of the show, I couldn't pop it up because it would have fucked off with the layout. But Randy says Maverick Bourque signs a 1-year extension with the Dallas Stars worth $950,000. That's a great play for both parties there. Maverick Bourque gets another year locked down on the roster, and the Stars get I'd like to say a player that could slide into their top 6 maybe in a season or two once he develops a bit. I know he's smaller, he's still young, but I like the way he plays, and he plays similar to a Stankoven, who was playing up in their lineup as well for the first little bit before he took a role.
Yeah, Well, we'll see what Bork does. I like Bork. I think he's
I like
good.
him. Former Shawinigan Cataract. Always have to give props to the QMJHL whenever I can.
Yeah, of course. I think that does it for today.
Yes, sir. We thank you, everyone, for tuning in to GDT Live this week. Like Colton said, we have a huge guest coming on Monday. We will not spoil that, but keep an eye out on our socials for Sunday. We'll be back 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on GDT Live.